Hello folks, this is Maxime Chouinard here from BAF here in Ottawa and Antrim Bata. So wanted to do a little video today about one of the main problems you're going to run into when you're doing stick fighting, and which is hand protection. And I'm not talking here about which glove is the best for stick fighting, lacrosse gloves are. No, but seriously, the issue we're going to be talking about today is not one of physical protection as much as how to not get hit in the hand. And my answer is not going to be just get good. It's also, we're going to be talking about how you must move a little bit differently when you're or position yourself differently when you're fighting with a stick. So basically, one of the big issues you see when people are starting stick fighting, especially when they're coming from a lot of time from HEMA background, fencing background, where people are used to have some sort of integrated hand protection on the sword, especially saber, broadsword as we have here. So if Callum stands there in guard, it's very difficult for me to go and hit his hand because it's completely encased. In order to hit his hand, I'd have to go around, and it's very easy for Callum to just follow me around with a sword and cover that. So a lot easier for him to cover as long as he doesn't start moving the hand around too much either, or then I could maybe snipe or stop his motion with a strike. So as long as he moves fairly linear with his attacks, it's going to be very difficult for me to hit his hand, right? It's a little bit like a shield, like a buckler. Now, even if he had a cross guard, or even just a little disc like you'd see on a katana or a dao, still it would afford less protection. He'd have to be a lot more careful about his hands. But the direct line of attack towards his hand, towards the top of the hand, would be easier to protect. And especially during parries, so if he was going to parry one of my hits, and if the strike was coming down, if there was just a cross tilt here, it would still protect against that. So it does make a huge difference. Now, obviously, with the stick, you don't have this. So if Callum switches for a stick, if he tries to stand in the same position he was in, now I can easily just hit his hand directly with just extending my arm from where I am, which is going to be very difficult for him to parry because this is in time of the hand, so it comes very quickly. I just have to extend. It's a very quick reaction time to be able to defend against that kind of attack. So problem number one, already the position you're in is going to be different when you're stick fighting. And usually in stick fighting styles, the answer to that will be to keep the hand farther away, right? In some styles, they'll keep it on their shoulder, they'll keep it across the body. In Antrim Bata, and I would say in most styles of Irish stick fighting back in the day, you would hold it above the head right here with the Buddha, so the lower part of the stick acting as your actual guard, guarding your arm, guarding your elbow. But more importantly, the hand is now a lot harder for me to reach. If I want to hit Callum's hand, I have to get close enough that I could just as easily hit his head. But the problem is he can now also just as easily hit mine. So I'm in a danger zone where I can easily get hit, where before I could hit with little chance for my safety. Well, a little danger for my safety. So again, this is the response you'll see in most stick fighting style. The other issue is movement. So as I was saying earlier, when you have a sword, usually you'll be able to attack in a bit more of a linear fashion. You're just going to be hitting with your hand going in a straight line towards the opponent, towards the target. Sometimes maybe a little bit of motion sideways, downward, but not a whole lot. And this is made possible by the fact that you have hand protection, and it's going to be a lot harder again for your opponent to just snipe your hand while you're throwing these attacks. Again, not a thing with stick fighting. So no guard mean that if Callum tries to send a straight attack to my head, I can just easily predict his line of attack, and just by going across this line, it's fairly easy for me to just time the hand, because I know that at some point, even my timing sucks, even if my distance sucks, I'm probably going to be able to hit his hand with some part of my stick and make it hurt. So the response, again, for the overwhelming majority of stick style, is to move your hand across when you're striking, right? So if Callum tries to attack me, now his hand travels not only in this axis, but towards this one, towards a sideway instead of just a front and back axis. So now if I want to snipe his hand, to time his hand when he's striking, I have to not only think about where the hand is in this space, but also in this, and maybe even up and down. So it becomes very difficult for me to predict, and I'm not a computer, so maybe I'll be able to hit his hand if I get lucky. Maybe if he makes a big mistake and just stays to that line, or if he gets very slow, maybe I'll be able to snipe it if I'm quicker. But if he just moves it around and I try to hit the hand, it's now very hard for me to snipe that hand while staying safe, right? So that's what you're going to see in most stick style. Again, fairly wide motions here with the hand. So you'll see that sometimes in some HEMA manuals, surprisingly a lot in 18th century, even sometimes in 19th century manuals, where their main focus is sword fighting. You're going to see in saber broadsword manuals all the time, they're going to explain you all the intricacies of fencing with a cut and thrust sword. And then at the end, they'll maybe have a little section on being, well, now that you learn everything about sword fighting, here's how to fight with your walking stick. And a surprising amount of them will just tell you, well, if you're fighting with your walking stick, all you got to do is maybe just move your hand through your guards more, right? Or keep the hand closer to your body, which are not bad things. But one thing they usually forget about is, how do you protect your hand while you're attacking, right? And they usually don't cover that. And they'll basically just say that or imply that you attack the same way you're doing with your sword, which means in a straight back and forth line. And again, as we've seen, this is a big issue if your opponent also has a stick, let alone a sword. So that's an issue you'll run into. And the thing is, with a lot of those styles, a lot of people doing that, what the common answer will be when you ask them about, well, how do you protect your hands? Are your hands not, exposed? Let's say if you're keeping them out here, or if you're hitting in a very straight line, and the answer is usually, oh, well, we have a block for this. And I've heard this dozens of times, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad way of thinking. Sure, it's good to have a block to protect your hands. I hope you have one, because then otherwise you're going to be in a lot of trouble. But it's not always possible to block, right? So if Callum here tries to attack me with a downward hit, right, as he's doing this, maybe he could try to block at the same time, do like a single time parry or something, or intercept at the last moment. But usually it's going to be very, very hard for you to parry at the same time as you're striking, right? So you'll have to do one of those two things. And if your strike is a straight line, straight predictable line, well, guess what? It's going to be very easy for your opponent to just strike your hand all the time. And you might have a block for it when you're just in guard, right? If I come here and just, okay, well, I'm just moving my hands around, I'm just blocking. Great, good. But that's only a small part of the issue. You also need to have a passive defense when you're striking and even when you're parrying, right? You cannot use exactly the same parries you will with a sword as you would with a stick. Again, I cannot parry here with a stick. Obviously, I'm going to get my hands or my fingers explode. I'm going to have to move the stick around so that the stick bounces away from my hand, or my parries are made in a way where the blow will glance. So again, just to recapitulate what we were saying, the issue with a lot of stick fighting is protecting the hand, how not to get hit on the hand. And I would say, again, the overwhelming majority of stick fighting styles that are efficient, that have a long tradition of stick fighting, what you'll see is they'll have great passive defense for their hands, either by stance, by keeping the hand away, by keeping the hand hard to reach, by also moving the hand around when they're striking, when they're parrying, to make it less predictable as to where the hand's going to be. And so by doing this, they'll be able to keep their hands safe. And sure, you might say, if you're coming in from a sword fighting background, that, well, all those big motions, they keep me all exposed. And, what if somebody just comes in with a thrust? Or, well, number one thing, if you're fighting somebody else with a stick, guess what? They'll also have to use those big motions. So you'll probably be able to deal with those with your own. But there are ways as well to protect yourself from motions that are a little bit more direct, right? If I'm fighting somebody that has a sword, and if I take a big swing like this, sure, they might try to thrust at me, but knowing that, I might change my style a little bit, try to bait them into attacking me, maybe to try and parry and riposte in a strike. Sure, it's going to be a lot harder. People invented swords for a reason, but it's not impossible to do it with a stick either. Anyway, so we'll cover that probably in another video and see what we could do possibly against a sword with a stick. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this little video here. So keep your hands safe, move them around. And if you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. And thank you.